Everyone in fitness has it wrong about muscle, and everyone in fitness has it wrong about strength. And I think strength is at the core of a lot of research studies, but then they're mixing the message. They just keep talking about muscle. What about endurance? What about mobility? The ability to sprint? What about just strength?
Do you think you would have thought this same thing when you were 31 years old and when you were squatting 1,000 pounds and benching 500 pounds?
My interpretation of what strong was only one way. Squat, bench, deadlift, that's how I got judged, and so that's what I did.
And long term, if you're not someone who's competing in the sport, do you really think it's going to be that beneficial for you to keep banging your head against this one wall?
In my quest for strength, I lost some abilities to do some things that other people would be like, oh, that's odd. Why can't he do that?
Bodybuilding, you're just focused on only gaining a lot of muscle. Powerlifting, it's gaining as much strength on the barbell as possible. But when you focus in on that, what it does is it makes it difficult for you to try to do anything else.
Everyone in fitness has it wrong. Everyone in fitness has it wrong about muscle, and everyone in fitness has it wrong about strength. That is something I want to dive into today because I've been saying for a really long time, strength is never weakness. Weakness is never strength. And I don't just say it because I love to hear myself talk, which I do enjoy thoroughly. But I say it because I actually believe it and I actually mean it. I think that strength is critical and strength is pivotal. And I think strength is at the core of a lot of research studies that people are sharing out, but then they're mixing the message a lot of times. A lot of times they're, in the next statement, they're then talking about how important it is to have muscle mass. And I don't disagree. I think having muscle mass is important. I do think that building your body up makes a lot of sense. You know, as we get older, we don't want sarcopenia and these different kinds of things. But I believe where people are going wrong is you need to send a signal to your body. And you need to send your signal to a body that we are not going to accept being weak. We are not going to accept going backwards. We actually want to advance and we want to go forward. So it's the training of the central nervous system that I think is more critical for longevity and for you to prosper as you get into your older ages.
Let me ask you this, man. Do you think, because you always, that statement, strength is never weakness, weakness is never strength. You said that from day one, right? But the way you look at strength, do you think you would have thought this same thing when you were 31 years old and when you were squatting 1,000 pounds and benching 500 pounds? Would you have thought of it the same way?
I think I've thought about it in a similar way for a long time, but in my quest for strength, I lost some abilities to do some things that other people would be like, oh, that's odd. Why can't he do that? Mm-hmm. Like it doesn't even require hardly any strength, but it requires some strength, requires some mobility. So in my quest for striving for one thing so hard, a lot of other things fell to the wayside. A lot of other things ended up in the rearview mirror, not getting tended to. But I do think that you can negotiate all this in a healthier way. I think when I was training for strength, and I was powerlifting and benching 800 pounds and these different things, I trained within ranges of motion that were shorter or just barely to the ranges I was required to do in competition. But looking back at it now, it's easier for me to kind of look at it and say, you know what happened there? It was, I probably needed to explore further ranges of motion, thinking of like something like a fly for your chest, like a chest fly, to really open up the pecs and get them to kind of stretch out and to go into a range of motion that was unfamiliar with my body. So for me to really hone in on some of the weaknesses that I might have had at the time.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And the thing is you were a power lifter. So in essence, you're a specialist of moving heavy ass barbells, right? But when building that skill, you lose out on a lot of things. Like you're probably not going to be the best at sprinting. You probably might not be the most flexible, although there are some powerlifters that do some flexibility work. But I think one of the goals that we have with what we're going to be talking about today is, even if you're a specialist in a sport, can you develop other capacities of strength that are going to assure that as you get older, you have access to everything your body can do? Because don't get me wrong, I think it's cool to be the 70-year-old that can still squat 225. Mm-hmm. But I think it might be cooler to be the 70-year-old that can get into a deep split squat, squat 225, still sprint on a dime, still do some jump roping, still have the endurance to run a mile. Like, and the thing is I don't think that it takes an excessive amount of work to be able to get to that goal, because you're not going too deep down a single rabbit hole.
I think that is the key factor right there. I think especially when we're talking about strength, it excites me because you can get strong doing so many different things. And if you are taking on many different disciplines and taking on many different things, then you have access to get better at those things because they're new, they're kind of novel to you.
Mm-hmm.
So something like sprinting up a hill. Again, sprinting, somebody going 100% out of nowhere, probably not a great idea. But, use your own caution, maybe go 80% first time out, maybe go 70%, get yourself used to these things. But when it comes to strength, and I think about how could somebody gain some pretty good strength? Well, they could try to do some pull-ups every day. They could try to do some push-ups every day. I mean, you could literally just wake up first thing in the morning and just say, I want to see how many squats I could do. Squat onto this chair. You're an older person and you don't want to squat maybe to the depth of, a 7-year-old kid or something like that. Then, just squat to a chair. Bang out as many push-ups as you can. The requirement, though, to build muscle mass and to hold on to muscle mass, it can be pretty tricky. I mean, I would say, like, if you're playing a sport, that might help quite a bit, because sometimes you can kind of play the sport and the sport helps you to burn a lot of calories, helps keep you pretty lean. And in some cases, some sports will actually, just the activities of those sports will help you to kind of hold on to some muscle mass. But some cases even make you lose muscle mass, kind of depending on how much you're doing that sport and everything like that. But if you're playing a sport and you're lifting and you're eating some protein and you're young, probably not that crazy of an idea to gain muscle. But again, I want to kind of bring it back to what I said originally. I think it's more about strength than it is about muscle. Having muscle mass, I think, is important, but it's really the training of the central nervous system. And when you talk about what you can achieve in a gym, I know that we can sit here and talk about so many different things that the gym could do for you, because it could help your brain. You're chewing up some glucose during the workout, so it could help with insulin sensitivity. The many, many different things that are going on at one time is unbelievable. And I don't know if we'll ever even know all the benefits of exercise, but you're not there to like lose weight. You're not there to burn fat. Again, you could burn fat. There's exercise you could do and you can measure it scientifically where you're like, yeah, you're burning a little bit of fat. But you're there for mainly two reasons. One reason is to add muscle mass, and the other reason is to gain strength. And the gaining of strength is looped into central nervous system training. Your nervous system can get trained with just about anything when you're untrained, when you haven't really done anything quite yet. Mm-hmm. So you can go in and bodybuild and you'll get stronger and you'll kind of prime your nervous system when you're young and when you're new to some of these things. And even if you're older and it's new to you, it's novel to you, you'll still get some training of the central nervous system. But I believe that coming up this year and the year following, mainly because I'm going to be shouting it out a lot, I think that the training of the central nervous system is really pivotal when it comes to cognitive function, and when it comes to your ability to, coordinate and organize your body into doing something explosively. And I think that is really critical for health. And then the last thing I want to add to that is the strength to weight ratio is super critical. So if you're big like Nsima, it's important that you're not just big and muscular, that you're also strong. And Nsima can do pull-ups and he can hang off the rings and he can do all kinds of different things. And that's really important to have a good strength to weight ratio as you get older.
And this is a video I want to pull up because I think it's really cool. This one right here, she is, I don't know if it says she's 60.
Yes, she says 60.
Dude, okay. Deadlifts 60 kilograms every week.
Yeah, so 60 at 60.
Rowing machine. Doing ropes. This woman also started lifting just a few years ago. And we'll put the video in the description. But I think like she had some sickness that she was dealing with a few years before, never's lifted before. Then her son, who's a trainer, got her started lifting weights and training. And now she seeks it out. but I can imagine the amount of muscle that she's gained, the amount of bone density that she's gained, what she's able to do. And she started this later in life, man. Look at her fucking deadlifting right there with
It's awesome.
pushing a sled. All these things can help develop strength no matter what age anybody is.
The other thing is, you know how many sets you need to do with this stuff? Not many.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, if you're an advanced, if you've been lifting for a long time, it's not uncommon for a power lifter to do 8 sets, 10 sets. I mean, that's fairly common. But if you're somebody that is, trying to get some of the health benefits of some of this stuff, you don't need a lot of sets. We know this from going out and doing sprints. Even if you're fairly fit, but you're not a runner, like good luck with a couple 200-meter repeats, 100-meter repeats. I mean, you're going to be wiped out. By the time you get to maybe say like your 4th one, you can now be trying to run at 100%, and that 100% could represent that 100 meters taking 20 seconds or more because you're so gassed. You're like just completely smoked from it. But I really think that training the nervous system is super important, but it's also super quick and easy because you don't need that many sets of it.
You don't. And one thing I want to add in here too is because there, again, like we mentioned, there's different aspects of strength. There's your body weight strength. So I think you should evaluate if you're a person who you can deadlift and squat a lot, but you can't really do that many pull-ups. Like pull-ups are extremely difficult for you, and a lot of body weight stuff is extremely difficult for you. Evaluate that, because like if you're so strong in one area, why can't you do these things that just require your body weight without extreme levels of difficulty? Body weight strength is also important. Those people that do calisthenics, when they're older, you see how well they're able to move. So I think developing that body weight strength is extremely functional. But I also think, again, because many people that listen may be powerlifters or bodybuilders. So when you're focused on those specific sports, for bodybuilding, you're just focused on only gaining a lot of muscle. Powerlifting, it's gaining as much strength on the barbell as possible. But when you focus in on that, what it does is it makes it difficult for you to try to do anything else. You're doing so much training volume. You're probably doing more than you really need to progress. And I think you could probably take away a bit of your volume from what you're doing for bodybuilding and maybe take away a few sets of what you're doing in powerlifting. And if you really want to develop all those skills of being a stronger human being, you could then go and have some energy to do a little bit of running or some hill sprints or any of these other things we're talking about. Because a lot of people are like, well, I can't do any of that right now. Well, it's because you're doing too much of this one thing. And long term, if you're not someone who's competing in the sport, do you really think it's going to be that beneficial for you to keep banging your head against this one wall?
And that's where I can kind of look at the error of my own ways, and even saying something like strength is never a weakness. Weakness is never a strength. The word never is a really powerful word. And so as I leaned more into getting strong, that was my only focus. And as you pointed out earlier, my interpretation of what strong was only kind of one way. It was squat, bench, deadlift. That's how I got judged. And so that's what I did. I also recognize that strength and muscle mass go together a lot of times. There's a cross-sectional situation that happens when you're training for muscle. You're going to gain some strength. And when you're training for strength, you're going to gain some muscle. So these things, they do definitely coexist. But I think some of the messages and some of the information that I see getting like clipped, or some quick takes that they'll pull from like a Peter Itea or even our good friend Gabrielle Lyon, I think if we were communicating with them, they would agree. Like, yes, strength is a huge factor in all of this. And when they're testing these people at these retirement homes, they're testing their grip strength and they're testing their leg strength. And they're not really testing how much muscle mass they have per se. But I'm also in agreement that muscle wasting can be a really negative part of getting older. But again, I think if you're strength training, even without like specific, hypertrophy protocols, I think you'll have the muscle mass that you need. I think that's the way the human body is designed. When I start to think about, I think about all these different like bodies that I've been like obsessed with since I was a kid, these different body types, these pro wrestlers and bodybuilders and power lifters, and going, man, like that is so awesome. Like, look at how jacked Stan Efferding is, or look at Hafthor Bjornsson, or look at these guys. As I've gotten older, I'm starting to think like, and this is, I'm not putting anybody's physique down. I'm just trying to more normalize what a male physique actually might look like if there's not performance enhancing drugs in there. And if somebody's not, it's not 24/7 their job to have this particular body type. And then you start ending up with a physique that probably looks, Sean Baker is an outlier because he's 6'5" and he's a giant, but I believe that he's drug-free. Paul Saladino, same thing, and Peter Itia. Those are physiques that are easier for people to work towards, but still very difficult. Like they still have low body fat percentages, but those guys are guys that work on their strength as well, especially Sean Baker, who's working on a lot of explosiveness and things like that. And I think that the key factor is for people to continue to work on strength and not just, you'll hear Itia or you'll hear Dr. Lyon talk on these podcasts. And I've worked out with Gabrielle before, and she does explosive movements. She's picking up sandbags. I mean, this is a woman that weighs like 100 pounds, and she's like moving around like 60-pound sandbags and stuff like that. I mean, she's almost picking up her own body weight, and like running 40 yards with it and stuff. It's pretty wild. So these people, okay.
I want to don't forget you were saying these people, but the really cool thing about what you mentioned from Gabrielle right there is because that she's working on strength stuff, but the way you pick up a sandbag is different from the way you pick up a barbell. She's also working on her functional strength of picking up an odd object in a different way, the strength of your hands to put it up. There's a bunch of little elements that are added there. So you can clump different aspects of strength because you use specific pieces of equipment.
Right.
You know.
And I think what might get misconstrued from people listening, or again, something getting clipped, is that they might hear Gabrielle Lyon talk about muscle-centric medicine and how important it is to have muscle, and how how muscle is important for insulin sensitivity and all these things. And again, it is. But I think like maybe it's me too, like maybe it's my own interpretation of what I'm hearing. I'm like, I think they're a little bit off, because it's not about being like super jacked, although I can appreciate that. And I want to be jacked and tan, right? That kind of goes more in line with like what I want to do and what I think makes me feel good. I'm not necessarily advocating it as like a health practice to be as jacked as possible, because I do think in those situations, I think to a certain degree, your luck runs out with just building muscle mass. But anyway, I think Gabrielle and Peter Itia and some of these people that you hear the message from about building muscle, gain as much muscle as you can while you can. I don't want to speak for them, but I would imagine if I asked them the question like, hey, isn't this a little bit more about like strength? Because your strength deteriorates. I mean, think about when you walk down the street and you see someone that's, in their 20s, what's the difference between that person and a person that's in like their 80s? The person that's in their 80s might be
their
kind of
dick going like our other guest talked about.
That's true. That's true. It could be. Oh, the 80-year-old with a boner. The person might be kind of like hunched over. They might be. They might look like their walk is like this laborious activity, like it's hard. A lot of times you'll see an older person. Andrew sent that clip of the person that was 100 plus. And their mouth was open and they were breathing hard and stuff like that. And totally understandable. You're 100 plus years old, but their strength is running out. Their body is starting to kind of deteriorate. The body's starting to kind of break down. And yes, I understand there's like some sarcopenia going on, but I think that, and again, the guy living to be 100, anyone living to be 100 plus, they get to kind of do and say whatever they want. I have no idea what that's like to be able to live that long. But I do think that strength is the real heart of it, because I think that our ancestors were able to build strength because strength does not take so many sets, and it just takes some simple stuff of working together, working together as a community and like carrying water and carrying food and hunting and doing all these activities that you would have done. Those activities don't slap a lot of muscle on you. So you might start to see where I'm coming from with this, is that your average person, like how much muscle you're really going to gain. Like if you're not really super intentional, like we talked about this on a previous podcast, if you're super intentional about gaining muscle mass, and that's a huge focus for you, and you have pretty good genetics, we might be talking about like 30 or 40 pounds of muscle mass from the time you're young to the time you're kind of adult-ish. And there could be outliers, could be people that are maybe a little bit more than that. But for most people, just through like normal activity that we would have done a couple 100 years ago, maybe working on a farm or something like that, how much muscle would that person gain? And for me, I kind of lock into this thought process. I know other people do too. Some people don't like this thought process of locking into like what our ancestors did, but to me, all the answers are already here, and they have a lot to do with our past and a lot to do with our history. So like, what would a healthy person, you know, like I guess I'm trying to think of like, you know, how would some of these medicines, even testosterone, how would testosterone help us to like live longer? I don't know if it does. I don't believe that it does. We haven't seen somebody live to be, you know, 115, 120, 130 and go, oh my goodness, like it's because they're on testosterone. Yeah. And some people might say, oh, well, testosterone hasn't been around long enough. I think it's been around long enough to know. I think that testosterone just gives us a little bit more time to fuck around and extend out a younger-ish body for a longer, prolonged period of time.
Before we get too far away from it, I wanted to ask you, Mark, about, you know, you said it's more about like getting a stimulus on the central nervous system. In the context that we were talking about with something being new to somebody or like kind of like newbie gains for somebody just getting started, how you really just want to kind of get a stimulus on that central nervous system. But when you try something new, sometimes you can get really wrecked. You're really sore and you're like, man, I don't know if I want to go back tomorrow or the next day or whatever. What do you think is a good, like a proper frequency for kind of stimulating that central nervous system?
Yeah, I think somebody that's new is just like, you know, small integration of bringing some of these things into your life. So if you're going to a gym and you're, you know, trying to do like a body part split or something like that, like if you've got a program or something like that, you're just going to have to take it really easy. You're going to have to start out very slow, take your time with it. A lot of people that I've advised over the years that are kind of newer to lifting, I think it's important just to kind of like learn the different exercises, learn the movements, learn some of the machines. And, you know, it might take you a while to learn some of these things, but the only reason why I would say like it might be a good idea to do multiple sets for somebody that's like newer would simply just be like kind of more for like the coordination. You know, like, okay, you did a set with that, you know, bench press machine, you know, do another set of it. And usually a lot of times they'll be stronger like on their second set because the body's like already starting to make adaptations, or the next week they'll be quite a bit stronger. So I think you just have to start out really, really slow, almost like I did with running. Just you got to really, really take your time with it.
And also, like, we got to think about with all of this stuff, if you're someone who's new to lifting in the gym, understand, or resistance training in general, like the coordination aspect of things is a big deal. I remember there's been a time where I was training someone and they're like, wait, how do I put the barbell back? Oh, just put it back. But they're like, wait, but how do I do that? Like, you put it back. And that's a coordination thing. These are little things that like you take for granted after you've been lifting for a while. You're like, yeah, just fucking stack it back. But some people getting up from the bench, how do I get up from this position? Oh yeah, you use your abs. You crunch here. Use your abs to get off the bench. I
mean, Andrew, you've killed your back a bunch of times getting up off the bench, right? Like I've hurt my back before too. Like it's a weird, uncomfortable thing. It's something you'd have to learn.
Exactly.
Mark had
all
to
these things.
Yeah, Mark had to actually coach me how to get off of the bench. And it was pretty cool. He turned it into some like a cool piece of content. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Even just like helping somebody re-rack weights, like for you guys, it's just like, you know, boop. But for me early on, it was like, dude, how do I get the big plate down on the, you know what I mean? Like, so you're right. There's absolutely some things that just you'll gain with experience by just showing up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you want to play this clip?
Yeah, I think it falls in line with what was just mentioned.
Milo Sarkev.
Former pro bodybuilder, now professional coach. So for those of you that know me, you know my story, but those of you that never heard of me, I competed in 110 shows, 72 professional. I was one of those that competed all the time. You know, every organized show I would compete in. I trained 6 days a week, twice a day, 15 years straight. And as you can imagine, you know, with this kind of volume and this kind of intensity and training that is required for pro bodybuilder, I endured just about every kind of injury and pains and aches, and had 3 surgeries on my knees, 1 on my shoulder. And of course, as I retired, I continued training like we all do. Once a bodybuilder, always a bodybuilder. But that challenge and excitement of going to the gym became punishment. I mean, when you are searching for a pain, and we all do, muscle pain there's that high, and you get the pump and you get the muscle feeling. There's no better feeling on earth. But when you go there searching for a muscle pain and you have nothing but a joint pain, squeaking, damaging, numbing pain, it's no fun. So let me tell you, any bodybuilder that would...
Keep going.
No, I think that was good.
Yeah.
He goes on to talk about stem cells and how important he thinks they are. And he had a good intervention with stem cells. But I'm just hearing from so many people that are like Milos Serkev that have been lifting for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy, I mean, Milos has one of the greatest physiques in the history of bodybuilding. He looked absolutely incredible. And I'm just seeing that more and more. And I'm not saying that like every bodybuilder is going to end up in pain, because there's ways to navigate this stuff where you don't have to be in pain. But what I'm suggesting and what I'm trying to get people to wrap their minds around, and one of the reasons why we had the people from Functional Patterns on, and another reason why we had a guy like Jack Cruz on, I'm trying to get people to not be so married to the ideas and the principles that they have now, and to start to expand their horizon, expand their mind a little bit, open up their eyes so that they can kind of see. I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky that I was able to, lucky and maybe like, I don't know, studied up enough to know to like move out of the way of powerlifting at like the right time.
Yeah.
And to start to get into other things. But I'd love for other people to be able to enjoy exercise, be able to enjoy their life, to not be in tons of pain. And I'm just seeing it from more and more people that I'm friends with, lifters and just old friends that just have been into like exercise stuff for a long time. They're not getting the same result from it anymore. And as Milos was pointing out, it's like you're going to the gym because you're looking for this like little pain stimulus that makes you feel good. Pain and pleasure, they come from kind of the same spot. But you try to get into your routine, you're doing like just a simple tricep push down, and all you feel is the pain in your elbow. Then you're like, all right, well, maybe that's not in the cards for today. Maybe I'll go over and do some like incline dumbbell bench. And you go to do that, and all you feel is like pain in your wrist. You're like, shit, man. All right, well, that's not great. Maybe I'll go and do, the leg press. And you go to do leg press and your knees are killing you. So I see this with a lot of people. And what I'm trying to help people to do is to like, let's pick all this apart and let's try to figure out a place to where we can do a lot of these lifts and do a lot of these things that we love to do and do them forever.
And this is, if anyone went and listens to the Functional Patterns podcast that Mark just mentioned, it's worth a listen because they have a lot of great concepts in that episode. But this was the exact thing that I felt like I had a fight with them about, or let's just say a disagreement, because what they were mentioning was you don't see many people lifting as they get older. And what we just pulled up with Milos is the prime example of that exact thought process. Well, I mean, we should they'd probably say, hey, look at Milos Serkev. Look how great he looked as a young bodybuilder. You never expect this man to feel beat up when he's older. But the thing is he mentioned 6 days a week, 2 workouts a day, fucking mind-numbing workouts probably. Probably when he got out of the gym, he probably felt more beat up.
He's known for like destroying people when they train with him. Yeah. And that's the way he trained himself.
That's the way he trained himself. But this is the thing when it comes to not just lifting weights, but with all forms of training your flexibility, training your endurance, training your speed, resistance training in the gym, training with calisthenics. You do not have to kill yourself to progress at any of them. The only reason you feel that you need to kill yourself is because maybe you feel that you really want to push yourself and you're really looking for a challenge and you feel kind of good after that. But too many of those inputs it's not good in the long term. You could do that here and there. You could have a pretty hard sprint session, but not every sprint session should be a hard sprint session, because when you talk to track athletes who are beat up in their 30s, and you ask them, why aren't you sprinting anymore? It's because when they were an athlete, they were beating themselves up with sprinting, absolutely destroying themselves. They wouldn't be able to sprint for days after their hard session, but that doesn't have to be that way. You could always get these inputs and actually feel better after that workout if you do just the right amount. Meat, it's time to gobble some meat. Good Life Proteins. And all jokes aside, Good Life Proteins is an amazing spot to be able to get your Piedmontese beef that has amazing ratios of protein and fat. So you get more protein and a little bit less fat for every single cut of steak. But they also have fish, they have lobster, they have picanha, which is beef. They have so many different types of meat, so you can pretty much move forward on your diet, get in better shape, take advantage of the things that we talk about here on the podcast in terms of protein leveraging, carnivore, if that's your business, keto, if that's your business. But you can all different types of meat to move you forward, and everything is the highest quality from Good Life Proteins. Andrew, how can they get it?
Yes, that's over at goodlifeproteins.com, and at checkout, enter promo code POWER to save 20% off your entire order. Or if you want to save even more, use promo code POWERPROJECT to save an additional 5% off your build box. Again, goodlifeproteins.com. Link is in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
You got to figure out a decompression. You know, you're going to do gymnastics, you're going to do sprinting. Most people that have done these sports to a pretty high level, they'll be the first people to tell you, like, man, I'm wrecked, and so are all my friends. And then you think, oh man, well, gymnastics is kind of bad for you. Well, yeah, if you're only doing gymnastics, but what if on top of doing gymnastics, which you explore a lot of mobility, flexibility, there's a lot of strength, doing the rings and some of the shit they do in gymnastics is an amazing example of strength. But maybe those people need to drag a sled. Maybe those people need to work on like specific exercises for the ankle and for the shin.
For the wrist.
Yeah, for the wrist, right?
Yeah.
Like where you're actually doing like a wrist extension exercise or grip exercises. I mean, a little bit would go such a long way. And when I start to think about what we've been talking about on the show for a while, we've mentioned this many times with diet. We know that dietary intervention is probably one of the hardest things someone can go through because there's so many like lifestyle changes, and to tell people that their diet is shit, it makes them feel bad because it's like kind of you're kind of judging the way that they live. You know, you're saying, man, your shit ain't working, man. Like you need to switch to something else because, you know, this ideology that you're under right now is just making you fat and making you unhealthy. But what we normally do here at the Power Project is we try to fill up people's plate with so much activity and so much stuff.
Options.
That they can't stomach anything else. They don't have room for anything else. And so if we do the same thing with fitness, if we say, hey, it would be great if you went on some 10-minute walks here and there. It would be great if you could microdose some mobility drills into your day. It'd be great if you could microdose some strength into your day. You start to kind of work on all these different things like, hey, you know, because you're strong and because you've built some strength, it also would be cool that you look like you lift. So maybe a little hypertrophy work would be a good idea. And hey, because you look like you lift and because you're pretty strong, maybe you should be able to tie your fucking shoes. Maybe you should be able to wipe your own ass. Like maybe these things, maybe you should have enough mobility to where, you don't look like a trash can kind of moving around all the time. So I think you want to try to explore a bunch of different stuff. And when you start to have, you know, a practice of running, a practice of mobility, I understand people have their 9 to 5 and like, man, I ain't got time for all this shit. And we're not even saying that you do it all in one day, every day.
Nope.
You just kind of spread it out whatever way you need to. But it's going to occupy a lot of your time. It's going to take some effort to do it. But when you do things this way, you're going to be able to spin a lot of plates at one time with none of them crashing down. And you're going to be able to lift and do the things that you love for really as long as you want, if you can take the time. You know, Andrew's been spending a lot of time. Andrew walks in the gym, he goes right to the mats, and you're doing a lot of this myofascial release stuff. It's like, I know at this point you want to do it, but at first you don't really want to do it. It hurts. You're digging these different objects into your ribs and your back and your butt and your hamstrings and stuff. And it's kind of miserable, but you're understanding the benefits of it. And then I would imagine like there's a reason why you're doing it. It's probably making you feel better, right?
Yeah, it's making me feel better, and it's also making me perform better. There's times when I'm on the mat or somebody, like, they're in my guard, and if they try to go to like a smash pass, I can feel like, ooh, I better let go because my lower back is probably going to feel that later. Now I don't even really have to think about that. Like it's like, it feels so much better that it's like, no, I can just work my game here. I know we can't like blanket statement a lot of things, especially when in all of this realm, right? But I know with like nutrition, we can say stuff like, yeah, aim for a gram of protein per pound of body weight. Keep your carbs somewhere around 100, keep your fats somewhere around 100. And if you're 200 pounds, you're probably going to end up somewhere around 2,000 calories if you follow that. So there are somewhat like, guidelines that we can recommend. When it comes to this stuff, would it be possible to kind of have it make it fit your fitness macros? Meaning, how much percentage should somebody try to give their strength, their hypertrophy, and then their mobility? Like, is that possible?
Let's see if we can break this down even further.
Yeah.
Because there's way more than this. But if we were going to put these into different boxes, there's like your barbell weightlifting, resistance training aspect of things.
Macronutrients.
Right? Okay, so there's that. Then we have our body weight, functional strength, balance, little plyometry, like all those body weight stuff, right? Vitamins, okay. And then we have our endurance, our ability to do certain things for a long period of time. You got your running, you got jujitsu. We have our speed and power work, which can be done in a lot of different ways. And then we have our flexibility, movement work, that type of stuff. So actually, I think we can probably talk about what we do for these different boxes, and then like people can pick what they want from there.
Sounds great, yeah.
All right, let's start off with this one that everybody obviously loves. Barbell, gym work, resistance training. How can people structure this so they can do some of it, get some of it in?
I really and I think it's, people are probably disappointed. They're like, well, he's on the other side of things now, so he thinks differently or whatever. But I truly believe this. I believe that most of the people that are lifting weights, they only get mainly 2 good sessions in a week. Even if you're trying to get 4 and trying to get 5, it's just not easy all the time. And if you have a regular 9 to 5, it can be difficult to just square your life away and have everything precision perfect to the point where, think about how many times you go home and tell your significant other you had an awesome workout. It probably doesn't happen like as much as you would like it to. So what I like to see people do is have way better accuracy. So I think just having this idea of lifting way less, I think can really help you achieve more accuracy.
What?
So if you lift like 2 or 3 days a week, I think you could have more accuracy. You could have more workouts consistently that are going to be better rather than you trying to go 5 days a week. Now, having said that, I also understand the everyday crowd. I get it. Like sometimes that discipline is great. And if you're in the everyday crowd and you're doing well and you got good momentum, then the everyday thing it's in a different category because the everyday thing is a little bit more of a mindset type thing. But again, I would just say, try not to overdo it when you're going. If you're going to go in every day, just kind of reduce the overall amount of exercise you're doing. I think you can get away with 3 to 4 exercises, per workout. If you're going in nearly every day or 5 days a week. And if you're going in just like 2 or 3 days a week, then maybe you need to double that. Maybe you're looking at 6 to 8 exercises. But if you work hard at 6 to 8 exercises for 3 workouts a week, and you do that for a substantial period of time, you're going to have incredible gains. It's going to be, you're going to be surprised at how much you can get out of really just three hours a week or so.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I agree with that. Like 2 to 3 workouts in terms of resistance training in the gym. And then outside of that, a lot of other things can potentially be microdosed, but I'll get into that on another thing. But if we're talking about the gym and you want to build a lot of other abilities too, 2 to 3 days a week, I think you laid it out really well. Anything you have to add to that?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add is just what I do personally, which is like I will have a, somewhat of a structure, but that structure isn't structured. So what I'm getting at is like if I was going to work Monday through Friday or whatever, Monday would be like a push-pull day. But if I don't get through that full workout, that workout goes into Tuesday and so on and so forth. So what my workout usually is, what it is is just a bunch of supersets.
Comprised of, I
Thank
think you're
you.
trying to say.
Fucking hell, I couldn't figure it out. Comprised of is a bunch of supersets. And when I say a bunch, I really mean like 3 to 4 max supersets. And if I don't get through all 3 on Monday, well, then Tuesday I might get 1 more in. And then Wednesday I might get 1 more in. And it's like, cool, now I finished my workout.
Yeah.
I just don't beat myself up the way I used to.
Yeah. And then obviously, like Andrew just said, like there's a lot of different ways. A lot of people are like, what are this? What's the best split? What's this? You could do full body, full body, full body. You could do upper, lower, full body. You could do, there's so many ways you can set this up for yourself. I think that some tools that you could try to use that bundle a lot of capacities into one are great, like the tank. The tank from Torque is one of those things where you're able to push, pull, get a crazy amount of resistance. You'll feel your whole body working with that type of thing. And that's when that piece of equipment is something that I think if everyone owned one of those tank sleds, there would be so much full body benefit because your whole body is working to push and pull an object through space.
Push, pull, row, push, pull, row. It's just like repeat. And even on the pushing, you can actually like kind of do like a bench press almost. You can do like a dynamic, shove like you're doing like a chest pass with a med ball or something like that. And I think, the reason why we're saying like, 2 or 3 days a week and we're saying like, it's because the amount of exercise that we do, we basically train every day. Like we're in a gym almost every single day, but we don't do that much. Like at least I don't do that much. Like I don't do that. Like yesterday I did a handful of sets of bench, did like 5 or 6 sets of bench, and in between bench, I did some jumps. And then when I was done with that, I did a little bit of sandbag stuff. I dragged the sled with my brother and his girlfriend, and that was it. But then I went on a run. So see, like these things, they start to add up, they start to accumulate. But again, if you're going to just try to condense it down into just a couple days a week, which I think would help everybody with motivation, I think it would help people with their time management, because people, that's what we hear the most, right? I don't really have time. Well, have you tried just working out on Saturday and Sunday when you have off from work? Oh, I never thought of that. I mean, that would be great. Saturday, Sunday, wake up at 7 a.m. before the wife and kids are up and go get a good workout in. And then by the time you get back, maybe everyone's up and they're ready for breakfast. You didn't miss nothing. They didn't miss nothing. And it also going to help a lot with motivation, because if you're trying to be motivated to train every day and you're taking pre-workouts, and we should do a whole show about no pre-workout, but yeah. Right. I mean, shit. But people are trying to like, just get so hyped for these workouts because they're tired from other things they're doing. And it's all understandable. I get it. I've been there. I think you guys have been there. And you're trying to make something out of nothing. But the best way to do it is just to calm down and probably not have as many scheduled workouts. All
right. Next up, our other thing. Let's look at this as like the functional strength, the body weight functional strength. The way I go about this is I think that your body weight honestly only takes your body. And I think this is actually one of the easiest ones that you can implement without the need of a gym. Because again, when people mainly think about training, they think about getting a gym membership and everything they do is at the gym. But with your body weight, this is where maybe some investment into some tools might be pretty helpful for you. You can get yourself a pull-up bar that goes on your door, right? So every time you're at your house, maybe you go through that door, you do a few pull-ups. You could go a little bit deeper and get yourself like some of those base blocks push-up things, or all these companies that have those type of dip bars or whatever. Because when I'm at home, when I'm watching TV with my girlfriend or something, I have my rice bucket in front of the TV. I hit that up like 30 to 40 minutes a day. And then I do some pull-ups, I do some push-ups, I do some dips on my dip bars that are literally right in the other room. And it's easy to do. And I'm improving at those skills without having to go out of my way to go to a gym to do it, right? It's not that expensive. You can have a slant board at home where you can do some, or at the office, you could sit in a squat and do some of that type of stuff. That gets into some range of motion stuff, but at the same time, that also lets you hit some deep squats with your own body weight while you're at work. You drop and do some push-ups. That doesn't require anything, but you can improve at all these things that improve your body weight strength to weight ratio.
You can do these every day.
Every day.
You can do them every day. And I guess, with running's a body weight movement. So I'm doing it every day, and then I've been working on jumping. And Nsima you mentioned this to me a while back about, how your jumps feel like not just your jump rope But yeah, you're feeling a lot springier and you're feeling like there's a lot less effort. So I was jumping yesterday and I was doing some like box jumps, and I brought the box height up a little bit, which I'm not really a huge fan of because I don't think it's always necessary for people, but it's fun.
Mhm.
You know, it's fun to like kind of see like, oh, am I progressing, you know? And so I was messing around with some of that. But what I noticed was that a couple weeks ago, I had to really kind of like throw my arms down and back to sort of generate like a swing motion, and then to bring my arms up to explode up to jump onto something.
Mhm.
And now I just don't really need that because my legs are just springier. And then I've been messing with jump rope, not a ton, not like super frequent, but a couple of times a week. And same thing, getting like springier. Like it doesn't require, I don't know if people will know what I mean, but sometimes the first time that you go to jump over the rope for an individual day, your body's a little stiff, and then it takes a moment to kind of get into rhythm. I don't feel like I have that kind of dead zone to start.
The juices flow immediately.
Yeah, it feels good immediately. It feels like a little bit more rhythmic immediately. And so I'm noticing some really good benefits from that. But yeah, you can train. Body weight stuff can be done every single day. I think some people like to get really regimented with stuff where they're like, I do 150 squats every day and 100 push-ups every day and 100 sit-ups. If that's you and you like to be regimented that way, that's cool. But I tend to just like mix stuff up, make stuff up. I mean, I was doing like almost like a skater lunge today, like off of that thing that I got from Cal Dietz. I was messing around with that on the couch stretch thing, and that was feeling pretty good. So like, I'll just kind of mix things up quite a bit, but body weight exercises are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
A quick suggestion too, real quick, would be really consider, because I understand when you potentially listen to us talking like, oh, these guys, all they care about is fitness. The reason why we care about fitness is because it's like long-term, it helps with everything else, right? So it's a good idea to try to set up your space at home, make it conducive to your fitness, right? Rather than just having a couch and a TV and whatever food stuff, like it is a good idea to get things that are just in your space that make it easy to pick up. Can you have a kettlebell in your space? Can you have a dip bar in your space? Can you put a rice bucket somewhere so you get your hands in there and you're actually working your wrists and your fingers? Like all these things can be incorporated into your living space. And yeah, when some people come over, they'll be like, why is all this stuff everywhere? But who cares, right? Because it makes it easier to take care of yourself. If only somebody did make a manual for how we should take care of ourselves, there would probably be more stress testing and use of the body, but that manual doesn't exist. So we have to do it on our own, right? So just think about that. Think about how you could make your space more conducive to your health and fitness.
Yeah. I've just been doing a lot more walking lately. Like
Mhm.
a lot more. So like yesterday, I worked really hard. Like I did a lot of stuff yesterday. And so this morning, it's like, dude, okay, I need to get in the lift. It's like, nope, I'm just going to go for a walk. And I just kind of threw my headphones on, went out for a walk. 2.5 miles later, I'm like, all right, I feel good. You know, I got here. I'm going to get some more steps in, because it kind of like almost like with that myofascial release stuff, you just start to feel better and better the more you do it. And so what I find is like at the end of the week, so, you know, about 4 jiu-jitsu sessions right now, I feel pretty tired but like I want to keep moving, but I don't want to overdo it because the main goal is to get better at jiu-jitsu right now. So what I'll do is I'll just go for another walk. And then if I feel good enough, that walk turns into a light jog. But it's typically never like hours of work. You know, I think the like route that I go is either 2 miles or 2.5 miles, depending on, you know, which turn I make.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm running, I'll take the 2 miler and I'll just cut it there and I'll be like, you know, I feel good. And then I'll kind of walk it out a little bit more to kind of calm everything down. But again, something that Josh Settlage actually had mentioned, he was just like, yeah, you just got to lace up your shoes and go. Like, how hard is that? You know, you just lace up your shoes and you start running. I'm like, you know, he's absolutely right. So that's just what I've been doing a lot lately, is just, you know, one foot in front of the other and just keep moving. Because it's when you sit down is when stuff starts to hurt the wrong way. Yeah. You know, like, forgot who said it recently, but it's like you can either be sore from a good workout or sore from not moving. And man, sore from a workout is a totally different like feeling, because that other feeling is just terrible. So I'm like, yeah, let's just keep moving, whatever that looks like. If it's a walk today, cool. If it's a run today, even better. Doesn't matter. Let's just keep moving.
I think there's a lot of things you can do to feel good. You know, like we're talking about like lifting and body weight exercises and all these different things we're proposing. But You should just basically have an ability to sprint, like an ability to, and then again, I say sprint, but I'm not even talking about like just necessarily going all out. And I'm not even necessarily talking about like running and sprinting, but I'm talking about the ability just to go from 0 to something that represents something pretty dang fast. If you get on an assault bike, you can produce a pretty good amount of watts. Someone that gets on the assault bike and they can only produce like 200 watts, they're probably fairly compromised. Like their VO2 max probably isn't very good. There's a lot of correlation with VO2 max and how long you live. There's some correlation with strength of your legs and longevity and things of that nature. And so if you try to do stuff and you're not able to have any explosiveness or any oomph to you, it's something that you got to question. If you don't possess the ability to like jump hardly at all, like you can't jump up onto a 6 or 8 inch like curb or something like that, then something's off. I think people just need to start to explore some other things. And if you're already good at something, if you're like Kenny Williams and you're explosive and you're a bodybuilder and you have good mobility, then I think you owe it to yourself to keep those things. And the only way you're going to keep them around is by at least doing them occasionally so that some of that stuff doesn't die off.
And this goes into our speed and power aspect of things. Exactly what Mark just said. Find ways to go fast on certain things. I do think that since I've started sprinting, I can't look back. You know what I mean? I'm sprinting multiple times a week now. And the cool thing about the sprint is that you shouldn't open up your body all the way when sprinting when you start off. Like you should try to keep your sprint at a safe percentage, whether it's a 40%, 50%. Yeah, technically it's not an all-out sprint, and most people wouldn't call it that, but it's a sprint for you right now. And as you get more comfortable, you can open things up. But when you have the ability to open up your body on a sprint, there's so much mobility that's going on there. There's so much range of motion that's going on there. But if your body isn't ready for it when you start, it's an easy way to hurt yourself, right? So ease yourself into that skill. Have the goal of unlocking it at some point, unlocking your ability to sprint, because when you do, everything feels easier. Because everything is easier, truly. But really do take advantage of that. If you have a rowing machine, if you have the ski erg, if you have a assault bike, whatever you have the ability to go fast on safely, do that. Get the heart rate up for a period of time and then slow down and do. You can do that type of stuff twice a week also easily. It's not something that you need to do every single day, but 2 times, maybe 3 times a week, you can do it. And the thing about this is if you want to do it frequently each week, then lower the intensity of which you do it at. So for me, I do like sprinting 4 times, 5 times a week. So what I'll do is at this point, all I'll do is 8 hill sprints, 6 to 8 hill sprints, right? I can do that multiple times a week now without it destroying my body, instead of doing 15 or 20 hill sprints. And if I did that, I'd probably only do it 2 or 3 times a week. So think about it that way. If you want to do this stuff more frequently because you like the way it feels, decrease the intensity. That means when you get off the machine, you're like, I could have done 5 more sets, but you don't, because you want to do it the next day or you want to do it the day after that.
I think you'll be shocked too at what this will do for your body in terms of leaning you out and muscularity and stuff like that. And again, it just doesn't take, it doesn't take the same requirement of all the things involved in hypertrophy. Like the hypertrophy game doesn't end in the gym. It just doesn't. You have to kind of tend to it all day long. You got to eat your protein and do everything else right. But when it comes to gaining strength, it doesn't really work that way. Obviously, you do need the building blocks, so you need some calories for sure. That is critical. But when I was powerlifting and I saw, not only myself, but other powerlifters not really paying much attention to sleep, not really paying much attention to their food, and people got stronger. It's because that signal is so strong to get stronger that your body tends to want to adapt to it. And I know that you can get big and people do so without as much sleep and stuff. But again, if you're not paying attention to your food and you're trying to gain muscle, you're making a huge mistake, and it's usually a lot harder for people. But what I love about some of these aspects of strength or even sprinting and stuff like that is that you can kind of just do it periodically, and you can have your own versions of it. We're talking about sprinting, and we're talking about hill sprints, but for somebody just kind of starting out, it could just be you just jog up a hill.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that's a good start. Like that's a great starting place. Okay, you jogged up this hill that's 50 yards and you did it 3 times. Like that's incredible. Like, you know, try that again in 3 days and see how it feels.
Ooh.
Go ahead.
Please don't lose your train of thought. See how it feels. When you mentioned jogging up a hill, it made me think about like one of the reasons why I love the rope is because it ties spinal rotation into everything you do. You can sprint with the rope. Okay, if you go to some of David Weck's stuff and you'll see this light rope that he's using, like you can literally see how fast can you rotate your spine side to side and do that for 30 seconds. Like don't do that initially. Like get familiar with like using your spine with the rope and then go fast. Like that, an aspect of sprinting is rhythm. Well, a lot of people don't realize that rhythm from the side to side of the body, right? So you can mimic that with a rope, that spinal rotation, and that's something that will help you feel more comfortable going out and sprinting, right? So you can even sprint with a rope.
Sprinting is fun too. Like once you get going fast and producing force on any of this stuff, it's a lot of fun. And I just think that it's like baked into our DNA. It's baked into your body to want to do some of these things. One thing when it comes to, you know, implementing some of these things, again, you could do your own version of it. I mentioned jogging a hill. You could go up the stairs and you can go upstairs like 2 stairs at a time and put a little oomph into that, like explode into it a little bit. If you're somebody that's been susceptible to injuries and you're nervous or worried about something, and just do it, you know, whatever way you need to do it to get it done. But I also noticed something really interesting that I think is a good thing to share with people. You know, there's many different versions of strength, and you can like run hills and different things like that. But something that is kind of hard to do and will feel really good to most people that are unexperienced with running is try to run. You know, you can pick a minute mile that best suits you. Like maybe you're a little on the faster side and that's fine, or maybe you're a little bit on the slower side. But if you try like a 6 to 8 minute mile pace. So it could be 6 minute mile pace, 7 minute mile pace, 8 minute mile pace. Try that on for size and try that for like a minute or two. A minute or two at a 6, 7, or 8 minute mile pace is a real bitch. And it's actually running. So the big difference between jogging, kind of shuffling along, jogging, I would say that jogging is a little bit akin to maybe like jumping rope. There's some rhythm involved. There's some stuff going on with it, but it's not that complicated. And it doesn't require that much of you. But when you start to like run, you're going to kind of feel your body twisting and turning. And it's almost like you're wringing out like anxiety in some weird way. Walking kind of does something similar, I think, if you walk far enough and long enough sometimes. But I've noticed this with running, so give that a try, because there's obviously like everyone can like run differently and people have different mobility and different attributes when it comes to these things. But try that out and try, doing it for a minute or 2 minutes or so. And you're going to feel your body open up and you're going to feel this like flow. And it's just going to be way different than anything. If you're not a runner, it's going to be way different than anything you've ever experienced before.
But it does take time to feel that, right?
It takes time.
Good.
Yeah, the first time you do it, or the second time you do it, or maybe in the 5th time you do it, you're just going to be breathing really hard.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, wow, this is like kind of crazy. But it's the reason why you see so many runners posting stuff and they're so happy and excited to share it, is because they're really hitting that feeling. And I think that's where the runner's high comes from. I don't think the runner's high comes from like just jogging and being out there for a while. I think the runner's high comes from running, and from running pretty hard.
I want to have a serious conversation with you about your balls, and I'm being serious here. On this podcast, we talked about a lot of things to help men improve the health of their penis, because it's important. And your balls have very thin skin. This is true. You can touch them right now, and it's pretty thin. Women do a lot of things to take care of their vaginal health, and men, we don't really think about the things that we put right directly on our balls, like our boxers. A lot of popular brands out there have chemicals that are literally touching your balls. Think about this. When you're in the gym sweating, when you're at work sitting, when you're doing all these things could be permeating into your scrotum. Things like BPA, phthalates, pesticides, insecticides, toxic dyes, toxic fertilizers, formaldehyde, all of which could lead to and could exacerbate lower testosterone, erectile dysfunction, and potential infertility. That's why I've partnered with NADS. And NADS is made with 100% organic cotton and no toxic dyes. So instead of putting just anything on your manhood, it's a good idea to get your hands on some NADS. And Andrew, how can they get it?
Yes, that's over at nadsunder.com. That's NADS under.com. And at checkout, enter promo code PowerProject to save 15% off your entire order. Again, that's at nadsunder.com. Links in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
But then let's think about this too. I think being able to get yourself to a point where you can run and attain a runner's high is good, because I think I'm sure that you can do that without messing yourself up. You can do that while getting good at a lot of things. But the thing is, just like with people who love training jujitsu and then they train themselves into injury even after they get proficient, runners who love to run and get the runner's high will run themselves into injuries. And you see this all the time. You see all these runners with foot injuries, back pain, knee pain, etc. And they're just like, I love to run. It's all I do. I'll keep running till the day I die. That doesn't have to be you. You can build this skill and you can build this ability by biting off a little bit of it and slowly improving at it over time and then become a proficient runner. But you don't have to be the person that, if you want to be, you can, but you don't have to be the person that does marathons 6 times a year. All right? Mm-hmm. So...
Yeah, a lot of people overdo it. You get excited about a particular thing, and then we do that thing that is supposed to be healthy, and we turn it into something that's not healthy at all.
And then this kind of falls into the idea, the strength side of endurance, right? Ways that you can build your endurance. I love jujitsu. I grapple for long periods of time when I do. That's something that's helpful. Mark, you run a lot. But, if you're someone who really does like using weights, you can implement like training for endurance into your weight training. With a kettlebell, you can do EMOMs, you can do complexes where it's like, okay, I'm going to literally swing a kettlebell for the next 5 minutes, or I'm going to do something with this for 3 minutes, then move to something else for a few minutes. You can do that type of workout with resistance training and improve your overall endurance by just keeping your heart rate up.
See, I love this topic because, again, it doesn't really have anything to do with building muscle. And again, I'm not against building muscle. I think building muscle is great. The cascade of disciplines that surround building muscle makes it a worthy cause for so many different reasons. And I will always promote that. And I think it's great. But again, I just think some things got kind of tangled up in some of the messaging that I hear. I'm like, man, I hope other people aren't listening to that and hearing it the way that I'm hearing it, because they just keep talking about muscle. And what about endurance? What about mobility? What about... the ability to sprint? What about just strength? I think strength is really important to be able to tap into that at any time. I was mentioning something to someone the other day about David Goggins. And people, David Goggins talks about being like the baddest man on the planet kind of thing, baddest man on earth. And it's such a great moniker, it's such a great thing to cling to. But make no mistake about it, David Goggins has a skill set that is out of this world. He has an exceptional, extraordinary skill set. And his mindset might have helped him build that skill set. But if we take somebody that we all admire and we take someone that we're like, yep, that dude's pretty tough. We take Joe Rogan, for example. And Joe Rogan tries to run with David Goggins. No matter the mindset that Rogan has, he's not going to be able to run with Goggins if he's going all out. Like, it just doesn't make any sense, right? Like, you can kind of envision that and you can picture that. So we have a tendency to kind of undersell. We oversell the mindset and we undersell the skill set. The skill set is pivotal. Nsima can kill me in fighting because he has a skill set, not because he's more angry, not because he is stronger in this case, but even if I was way stronger and we had a bunch of metrics for me, and we could say, wow, Mark's faster and he's stronger and he can do this and this and this, I'd still get killed because I don't have that skill set. And you've seen it so many times. And I think jiu-jitsu is such a wonderful example of that. I've heard Joe Rogan kind of talk about it before where he's like, that's just what happens to white belts. Like with somebody that's been there for, somebody who's been training for 4 years, like they can't do anything. And obviously there's outliers to everything.
Yeah.
You know, you could have a NCAA 2A champion, you know, white belt, and there's some shit, right? There's some shit that can happen here and there. But for the most part, you get what I'm saying. And I think that when we're doing all these things, keep in mind you're building a skill set. And over time, your skill set and your mindset, they'll both expand. They're both going to grow. You're going to get tougher and better at all of it. And so I guess my point in bringing it up is when I think about longevity, I'm thinking, man, if you build up all these skill sets going into your older age where you don't have a problem going on a run, you don't have a problem going to jujitsu, you don't have a problem with, hitting up some heavy deadlifts with your friends, you don't have a problem with boxing a couple rounds and sparring or hitting some bags or going on a hike. You don't have a problem doing any of these things, not because you're mentally tough, but because you have a skill set for it.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then I think what comes naturally here is, flexibility and range of motion is the last thing that we mentioned. But before we get into that, I do want to mention with all of this, use your mind and then think of the person that goes balls deep into one avenue. So when we were talking about barbell and weightlifting and resistance training, think of the people that went all in on that. And that was their form of fitness. And then you could probably think of all the holes they have in their fitness. Like there are some people that do that are flexible, but most aren't. There are some people that do that have some endurance, but most aren't. Most can't really even run or sprint, right? They're really good at this one thing, but they're really bad at other things. And then just take that and move it into the bodyweight functional people kind of got a lot of benefits, right? But they can't do other things. When we look at people who are really good at endurance, we then need to think about the guys who are doing 50 milers, 100 milers, look at how they look at how sickly they look. We actually had a podcast recently about visceral fat, and I talked to this woman who does DEXA scans for a lot of people. She did my DEXA scan too, and she said the people that generally have the most visceral fat that I notice that are generally seen as fit are the runners. Mm-hmm. Why? Because they always intake all these gels and all these things for their runs, and they end up having a lot of visceral fat, even though they're not very big, wow. Right? So and then speed and power, when you're really good at that, but you go way too far, then you can't do that as you get older because you've killed it. Flexibility and range of motion, yogis, they're just really flexible, really have really good range of motion, but they have all this joint laxity, and this is why FP kills them all the time, right? Functional patterns goes at them. But that's still a good capacity to have. And I think range of motion and flexibility is something you could easily do any of that stuff around the house. You could do any of that type of stuff when you're sitting around. You can go sit in a squat. But then you can also use the gym to improve those things. So when you're lifting, can you do certain movements in your training routine that move you into a longer range of motion, but move yourself out of it? So now it's not you're just passively flexible, but you are actively controlling yourself in and out of those ranges. Conceptually, if you just take that concept and do that, you can work on flexibility and mobility with your training routine.
You're bringing up a really good point. And runners and cyclists, it's easy for us to look at them and to be like, man, what are these guys doing? Or what are these girls doing? Like, this is wild. Like, they're kind of skin and bones. And people for the Tour de France, they want to like weigh less and less. That's like super important for them to only have to haul around X amount of weight during that activity. But at the same time, those people could look at like a pro bodybuilder and be like, what are these guys doing? Like, they're plenty big. Like, why is Nick Walker trying to get bigger? Like, he's absolutely massive. It's absolutely insane. The hypertrophy levels that some of these people have gotten to. And I think, from sport to sport, from one sport to another sport, it's probably easy for someone to look at that. Even just thinking pro football, like an MMA fighter might think that pro football is crazy because of the CTE.
Yeah.
And a pro football player would be like, no, you guys are nuts. You're punching each other in the head. Like, that's wild. And so it's kind of easy from one thing to another to look at it. But when you're doing the sport, it's normal. It's like if two runners were talking and somebody was like getting ready to do an ultra marathon, the guy would be like, yeah, instead of like lunch this week, I just went out and I ran 25 miles or something like that, instead of my normal lunch break, or instead of going home for a few hours, I just ran 20 miles. And that sounds crazy to most people. And most people probably wouldn't be able to run 20 miles. And anybody that could run 20 miles would be sore for 3 weeks from that. So what's normal in one sport is definitely like abnormal to the normal person. But I guess a lot of what we're trying to communicate here is like, there's probably a lot of good practices in yoga. Yeah. They meditate a lot. They know a lot about breathing. There's probably a lot of good practices that are done in Pilates. There's probably strongman. Strongman is like one of the greatest sports. And if you get your average person to do some strongman training and strongman events, that would be amazing. But you know what the problem with strongman is? It's way too heavy. The weights are these guys are so strong. These people are so strong that it's just astronomical. Even some of the implements themselves without any weight on them, some of those things are, 400 or 500 pounds before they ever even put any weight on them. So the sandbags that we have in the gym and the med balls that we have in the gym, the heaviest sandbag that we have in the gym is like, 300 pounds, I think. For strongman, I mean, they pick that stuff up, they'll shoulder it, they'll walk around with it. They'll wear it like a hat, like we did with the 40-pound sandbag today.
Do you guys think it is a good idea to try to prioritize some of these things? Like literally like, okay, I got if it's a strength athlete, I got my strength work done. Should I then move right into endurance, or is it like, oh no, maybe I should work on the flexibility? You know what I mean? Like bigger bang for your buck, I guess I'll say.
Yeah. I think that like this is an individual thing. You look at these things as like they're human capacities. That's how I look at them. That's why, like, again, when we had the conversation with functional patterns, I was just like, well, I totally like what you guys are doing, but I'm not going to let go of these other human capacities because I have the ability to do them, but I also have the ability to run, sprint, throw, and jump. So obviously it would be good to maintain them. So if you're someone who's a lifter or a bodybuilder, how can you develop these other capacities so that you're not only a bodybuilder or you're only someone who's just big, but you have these other things that you're able to do? If you're someone who does yoga, how can you then develop these other human capacities of strength, endurance, speed, functional strength? You can do that. You can absolutely do that. But yoga can still be your main thing. For me personally, jiu-jitsu is my main sport, but all these other capacities help me to be a better grappler. And I guess I'm just lucky with my sport because all these other things help me grapple better, right? So just figure that out. You can still have your main thing, but just because you have your main thing doesn't mean everything else, every other capacity has to go to the wayside unless you're a professional that's doing this and making money off of doing this. But the thing is, that's not most people. Most people are doing jiu-jitsu for fun. Most people are running for fun, They're not running to make money. So that means let's do the other things that are going to help us age well rather than doing only the one thing and getting good at the one thing, but then we lose out on all these other aspects when we're older.
Yeah, I think we're unique in that sense. I think that you're not seeing that many other people that maybe desire to go after a bunch of different things. Because I know for myself, like, I'm not on top of everything all the time. Like, it's impossible to be on top of all these different things that we talk about all the time. But like, I do practice the myofascial release. I do eat properly. I do fasting. All the stuff we talk about on the show, I'm always kind of messing around with, always, trying to bring these things into my life and seeing how I can bring them into my life. But there's a lot of people that do jujitsu. There's a lot of people that power lift or do other things, and they're just doing that. And during my powerlifting career, that is primarily what I did. Luckily, I learned about some other things and some other techniques, but they were still very much kind of boxed in or boxed around powerlifting. Like, I did learn about diet. So after every powerlifting meet I would always lose weight and be in a little bit better shape and sort of try to recomp each time. I did learn about like dragging the sled and having some sort of conditioning, even though it wasn't great conditioning for really anything else other than being able to handle the training for powerlifting and to get in a little bit better shape each time that I did it. And then learning some stuff from like Kelly Starrett about mobility. So I've always kind of been poking around at these things. I just wasn't as open to them. And I'm hoping that the people that are listening to this can learn from some of what I did, because my body is basically, I don't want to say forever compromised because that's a long time, but it's pretty compromised from a lot of things. Like my hips are super tight. I don't have, squatting, full range to the ground with my heels down. I know some people are like, hey, I wouldn't mind that trade-off. You're fucking rich and you did really well in powerlifting, so shut the fuck up. I agree, and I wouldn't change anything. But it would have been nice to have some of this knowledge because kind of spinning out of and going from powerlifting to some of the other things that I'm doing now, I would have probably been able to turn things around a lot faster and have things be maybe a little bit easier.
And that's why with everything that we talked about here, I think a lot of this then comes back down to the ability to microdose it. Because as you were saying, like you were, if you knew a lot of this, you would span out of powerlifting a little bit better. But for any of you that are focused on a specific sport, with all this other stuff, figure out ways to microdose them into your training day or into other days during the week. Like we mentioned, keep some tools at home, right? When you go into the gym, think of other things you could do. Get some tools that allow you to move your body in different ways. That's like the rope is something that I think is really good because it's low impact. People can do it when they're older, et cetera. But it gives you this spinal movement that you're not getting with most other things that you do. You know what I mean? So it's an easy way without any type of extra resistance to move your body in a different way. We talk about these things all the time, but just figure out how to do that. Figure out a way to microdose it. It doesn't need to be a huge workout, but if you do these small things over a long period of time, it's going to add up for your body, right? Because many people aren't doing any of it right now. So just think of doing 5 minutes a week. That new thing for 5 minutes a week, that goes a long way in the long run. And
some of what you're doing is like, obviously doing as much high-level jiu-jitsu with the best guys in the world, doing as much as you possibly could handle would be great. But that could be easily overdone.
Absolutely.
Because you can just get cooked from doing too much of that, right?
You will get cooked.
You'll get cooked. And so you need to have other stuff that, you're posting a lot of stuff on your story on Instagram and people are like, oh, the guy seems pretty like chill. Like he's just like doing this like rope flow stuff. And then he's juggling like a kettlebell. And you're doing a lot of these things that don't look, they don't look anything like high level jiu-jitsu, but in your mind, it's allowing you to express strength, explosiveness, dexterity, coordination, rhythm in a similar way, but it doesn't really cost you anything. Doesn't beat you up. It's like a little bit of energy. You're outside. Maybe you sweat a little bit, but that's about it.
I'll talk about this on another day too, but I look at like these things as flow activities. So these are activities that allow me to get into a flow state that aren't jiu-jitsu. Because one of the reasons why people love running and the runner's high is because they're able to get into a flow state with running. They're so efficient that their movement takes no level of thought and they can just keep going for miles. That's the same way I feel when I do jiu-jitsu.
And you're nasal breathing, doing a lot of this stuff, and you're just kind of... you're playing music usually, and you like are. What do you mean by flow state? Give us a little more detail if you can.
I'm going to use jiu-jitsu as a description. When you become proficient enough at any activity where the way that you move your body is now not dictated by you thinking about moving. It's just you doing the thing your body knows how to do with no inhibition. So a flow state, I can get into a flow state with jiu-jitsu because I've trained so much over the 9 years that I can roll with somebody and boom, I'm just in it. I could close my eyes and roll with them because I know where to grab. I know where to sweep. My body knows what to do, and there's no level of thought. That is like that's the best athletic feeling ever, which is one of the reasons why people love to train jiu-jitsu so much after a certain amount of time, because when you get good enough, you can flow. You're not thinking, you're just rolling. And the runner's high, I think an aspect of the runner's high is you're on it. Your gait's good. You're everything. The way that the body's moving is
a couple miles go by, and you're like, "Wait, what? Like that's been amazing." And you're like, "What was I doing?" And you're like, "Fuck, I'm not sure." And then you can't get it back. It's gone.
That's flow state. That right there is flow state, and that's why people dive into running so deep because you think about it. Lifting doesn't give you that because you're doing a set, you stop. Set, you stop. You're thinking all the time. But with the flow, that's why they call it rope flow. When you become proficient enough, you're doing these things, and then you're not thinking. Your body's just doing these patterns that it's learned how to do. You're rotating. It's another flow activity, but it's low impact, no impact at all. Kettlebell juggling, same deal. When you get proficient enough, you're now flipping a kettlebell, and you're just in it. You don't have to think anymore. You're grabbing, flipping, grabbing. It's a flow activity without beating you up. So that's why I like these other things, because it allows me to get into these flow states that I love to do with jujitsu. But jujitsu is not the only flow activity I have, you know?
Strength is not always a weakness. Maybe. Strength is never a weakness. Weakness is never strength. Catch you guys later. Bye.